Yo, yo. What's up? All right. Um, so today I just wanted to go over a bunch of feedback and thoughts about melee in PoT Terraria mod. So I pretty much done all the content. Um, Finished up basically everything I wanted to do. Um, and there hasn't been any new stuff yet, so kind of just chilling on that. But I did want to go through and provide some feedback for kind of how melee looks as a class and some improvements and the changes maybe that could be made to make it better or more balanced or whatnot, right? Especially compared to some of the other classes, which are for the most part quite a bit stronger, I would argue. Um, Kind of tends to be the way it is for melee up until the very end game, and of course, I'm not playing with um, Zenith or anything, which is heavily nerfed in this mod for balance purposes, obviously. But so melee could probably get quite insane depending on like if if that functions, especially for just clearing. Because I think, I mean, if you do stuff like events and things like that, and you use Zenith, of course, that's going to be really strong. But it's nerfed inside domains, which is and like maps and stuff, right? Anyway, that's besides the point. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about kind of progression. So I managed to finish up level 100, 7th on the ladder, first overall for melee, first level 100. It was okay. It was a bit of a grind, but we got there in the end. I didn't AFK really or do any of those kind of like I didn't use spawn rate enhancements or anything like that, right? So kind of just tried to get the genuine leveling experience there, and it seemed to work out okay. Um, you can kind of see this website's really sick. Just pathterraria.com leaderboards. You can go there. You can see my build just by clicking on my character, kind of like Beauty Ninja. So that's pretty cool. And then, yeah, you can check out like this is the gear I'm rocking. It doesn't show accessories, unfortunately. It shows my passive tree, so you can see it doesn't show the masteries that I've taken though. It has some of them here, but not all of them. I think this should probably just be reserved for masteries if masteries aren't going to be shown on here because it has some of them like this one, this one, this one's a mastery, this one's a mastery, and that's it, right? But it's randomly showing like my strength in dex, which you can already see up here, right? Like you can already see. Um, and then it's showing like random stuff like these bleed nodes and whatever. Like I don't really think those are important. So if this section could be restricted to masteries, that'd be great. And then of course showing accessory slots too would be cool. But overall, really cool setup. The fact that they threw this together pretty much like a few days before launch and kind of adapted it slowly over launch, first like week, is pretty sick. So you can actually see like what people are building, right? So if we go to the leaderboard, we can see like, okay, first guy is summoner, right? And this is kind of the setup they're running right now, right? If you go to classes, you can see that there's only one other level 100 melee who got there recently, I think. If we look at the overall, yeah, right. And then range, of course, there's 4. There's 1 magic, 3 summoners. So you can kind of see the spread of people who are like who've actually played through, right? Which is kind of cool. You can see their stats and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, so you can check out the character there. I'll explain it later, but it's not really the focus right now. I kind of just again wanted to go over some of the progression. So first, I just wanted to kind of give a general talk. This map's already done. I was just gonna run something. Just to kind of show off stuff. So as you can see, maps have like 0 to 4 mods. So just throwing this, right? It does make a difference when you're hunting for XP, but anyway. So overall, I think melee is quite decent. I wouldn't say it's insanely strong or anything like that. Especially without Zenith, right? Because you can't really use Zenith in these. There, it's like, well, I haven't tried, to be fair. I could probably craft one and check it out. But the thing with maps right now is you're basically just rushing to the rifts and stuff like that. But overall, in the end game, I think melee's it's okay. There is one thing. There's a couple things that I think are really like propping it up though, and I think if those get nerfed or changed so that melee can't utilize them, it'll be quite rough for melee. But overall, um, it's decent. Like I'm killing content, no problem. Um, I'll show single target in a second, but overall, it's not too bad. It's a little underpowered, especially compared to stuff like ranged and summoner right now. But those are due to a few fight broken interactions. It looks like I'm taking a lot more damage than I actually am because my rage stacks and stuff give me max HP, which doesn't actually get healed. And even though I do have healing from bleed, critting bleeding enemies, it doesn't work when the enemy is insta-dead, right? So it doesn't actually do much. So I know, this is pretty strong for some classes, right? 7-10% of damage on critting a bleeding enemy, which is basically 10% of the damage you do return to you as HP. It's really good when you're fighting bosses and stuff, obviously. But if you can't actually crit the bleeding enemy because they're already dead, right? Or they didn't even get bleed proc because they got insta-killed, which is what happens mostly for these, enemies here. It doesn't actually do it. So I can like heal up and then I'm at over 1,000 HP with my rage play stack. But yeah, otherwise it kind of just sits there. I mostly take it for the fire conversion. Anyway, so as you can see, melee clears content, no problem. I'll show you the turn in a sec once this rift is done. But I don't have too many issues. I'll talk about the damage scaling later and some issues with it because there are some. Like I mentioned, that melee really makes melee kind of more viable than it otherwise would be. So yeah, and then we'll just kill this. Oops, I did not mean to stand it. That thing, by the way, does not work. It kind of bugs out damage actually. Even though it's supposed to, this thing should give you fire damage, like extra damage when you're standing in it, but it actually makes you do less damage. I'm not sure what the interaction is there, but yeah, that's kind of how it works. So you can see, decent enough. You get to, on this kind of boss, where you're not really hitting it too much. You can get up to 100,000 DPS depending on the target, right? If you're fighting something more worm-like or something with more segments, something that you're going to hit more, then obviously you're going to get higher DPS and stuff like that. But on a single target like this, like 50k or so, something with your buffs up. So not bad. And then so again, melee's, it's okay. Someone argued it's in a balanced state. I don't exactly know what the goal is for some of the damage numbers and that kind of thing, and like kind of how strong people are. I'm sitting at 117 defense. Nothing crazy. I obviously am getting some damage reduction from Worm Scarf. That's about it. I'm running Shield of Cthulhu because it actually rolls shield mods right now, which is quite strong offensively, right? So I get some crit chance, crit damage, shock chance, blood clot chance, right? Otherwise, I mean, you could run something like Paladin Shield is maybe better here, or because it gives more defense, right? Which I probably have. Yeah. So I could roll that if I wanted to. Probably might do. But either way, it's one of those things where it's kind of the accessory slots. I mean, some of them are obviously really good. Like this yo-yo bag basically makes yo-yos viable. If you don't have the yo-yo bag, your DPS is just a joke. Unfortunately, you can't get it very high item level. But it is what it is. And then Warrior Emblem, just arguably you could go Destroyer Emblem or something to get more crit. as well, but it's not super necessary. I'll do this later. But yeah, so the main things I want to talk about first of all is progression. So one of the biggest issues with melee right now is progression. Let me see if I can pull up where I had it earlier. Oh, here it is. Okay. Um, yeah, I basically here's the kind of the boss list, so we can kind of talk about that. But so melee on start again, I haven't had a chance to create a fresh character with like some of the changes that have been implemented, which honestly I think will probably make it harder, if anything, because there were a couple bugs that made melee quite strong right at the beginning where you were taking a lot less damage and you know that kind of thing. Um, but basically, in my experience from launch day, melee was solid until Wall of Flesh. And there are a couple things that I didn't try on Wall of Flesh just because I was like, there's no point. This is gonna be better no matter what, probably. Um, but I played with melee, like actual melee until Wall of Flesh, basically. Yeah, King Slime's okay. Again, Ipathu is okay. Like I fought both these guys. Actually, I fought them all with Ice Blade. So let me see if I still have it. Yeah, so this Ice Blade here, um, the damage is a little wonky right now because some of the passes I'm taking, but yeah, this will do way less damage than what it's saying here. Some of my accessories and stuff are giving it more damage, um, but yeah, I use this for basically all bosses up until Wall of Flesh, and it worked out quite well. Basically, what I did was I simply pathed here, grabbed these two, took what was it? This one, uh, Titanic Impact for melee strikes. So I think this only works on the actual melee hit. So for example, um, this part, like the actual sword hitting the target, not the projectile, right? And so it doesn't work on yo-yos because yo-yos are just projectiles, I think. So it didn't look like it worked on yo-yos. I don't know if that's true or not, but I mean, that would make sense given the wording for melee strikes, specifically not melee damage, right? Or anything. I'm assuming that was the intention there. But it feels okay. It's better than these other two. I'll talk about the masteries and stuff in a sec. I just kind of want to go over what I did for progression, how it felt. So yeah, again, Ice Blade. Basically, I pathed over these two damage nodes, one up here, and then all the way over to the Rage Cluster, essentially, and then up for some defense here. Maybe I grabbed this attack speed one. I can't remember. And then maybe this 10-point strength as well, just for some extra HP, but yeah, it was mainly just this rage cluster and these points here, and then here. Yo-yos they're pretty bad on start just because you don't get good ones, right? I mean they're okay. Like if you manage to get a cascade or something, or like yeah, the high five is okay too. I use that for a little bit, but it's not really great on bosses, especially Wall of Flesh and stuff like that. Yo-yos just suck because of the hungries and all that kind of stuff. It's really hard to do damage. To the wall with all that. So yeah, that was kind of the progression there. Let's see. So yeah, King Slime, not a big deal. Again, there was a bug to where you were taking a lot less damage from this damage reduction with Rage, I believe. So that's something to take in mind is that even though I was melee, you know, I wasn't actually taking that much damage. I think that's probably still okay because yeah, you get enough like if you path up this way and grab like 10 defense, right? 5% damage reduction, 15 defense, right? So you can get some pretty decent defense. I don't know if you have enough points to get there like that early on, but I had enough for rage and these points here, like I said, which is plenty of damage and a little bit of DR. Yeah, and of course it gives you some crit, and this is really minor though. Like, I mean, I can show now like the crit. So my crit chance is sitting at 48, but that is because this node here. Right. So if I actually crit, then my crit probably is like down. Yeah, 14. Right. So And if I stack up rage and I've crit recently, then my crit's looking at, you know, okay, this is a little bugged because, or it's not bugged, but it's yeah. So rage plus the damage from this also procs it and stuff like that, right? So technically, this is what it looks like my crit is, but again, it's a little confusing because of this. If I take this off, it probably gives a better picture. Let me see. Yeah, so crit chance 14.29. That is my actual crit chance. If I stack up rage, 15.62, right? So it's about, you know, it's not even 2% actual crit chance that this rage node is giving. So it's actually quite whatever, right? It's okay. It doesn't really do much. And I'll talk a little bit more about crit because crit is quite important, I think, for melee power. In terms of the way that the tree's set up, right? A lot of the melee nodes are based on crit as a damage scaler, and it doesn't work too well in early progression, right? Because I guess we can just get into it now, right? One, you don't have very high base crit, right? Like you can see, like, you know, well, this might not change anything. Yeah, it doesn't. There's no. I mean, I have a little bit of check multi, but that's different, right? It's a little confusing because I have crit on stuff. Also, you might notice that I'm still using a item level 5 bronze kite shield. That's because this actually has the old rolls. It used to be able to roll. You used to be able to roll this what was it? Added critical strike chance here, right? Plus 6.83 added critical strike chance. This is base crit. So as you can see, I take off my shield. I go down to 8.27, right? And I go back up to 14. That's how impactful this base crit is. It's strictly just a flat increase to your critical strike chance, right? This can't roll on shields anymore, and the reason why I'm still using the shield is because it's the only shield that I had at the time that had this, right? And now you can't roll it, which is a huge issue, actually. I'm not sure why they decided to remove it. I think probably because of range. Rangers scale insanely well off of crit, and you can roll those crit mods on like other shield items, which is almost certainly not intended. But I think if they can make it to where these like Shield of Cthulhu, Paladin Shield kind of items don't roll actual shield modifiers, and you can't use shields with guns and bows, which is, I think, the intent. You're not supposed to be able to, but you still can for some reason, right? Like I don't know. Yeah, just like as you can see, I can still and you know this works because my defense, right? So 14, third, you know, it goes up by 3, right? So it does still work. With ranged weapons, I don't know why, but obviously that shouldn't work. I think base crit does need to come back on shields or at least melee weapons or something, right? I'm assuming you can roll it on melee weapons. I actually don't know. I don't remember off the top of my head. Yeah, I know my weapon is like low item level and stuff. I just haven't bothered because I haven't needed to go back and, you know, farm for it to get at a higher item level or anything. Anyway, that's a whole nother topic, but so again, so if we look at melee, right? Well, we check some of the mastery, right? So here's the mastery. This kind of feeds into early progression, right? So do I want to get into this now? Let me go back to the boss thing for a second before I get too off track. So again, King Slime, Eye of Cthulhu, Eater of Worlds, even Queen Bee is okay. Skeletron, Deerclops, these are okay. I did kill Deerclops on melee, Queen Bee on melee, Skeletron. Pretty sure I killed Skeletron on melee too. Yeah, I'm pretty sure I did. And then I swapped to ranged on my melee character, like for Wall of Flesh, all the way up to Plantera base. Actually, all the way up to Endgame, basically Moonlord. Yeah. Because it's just strictly just far better for hard mode. At least it was before. It's probably okay now, depending on weapons. I'll talk about some viable options and stuff later. But basically, like, some of these bosses and mobs were, at the time, were doing insane amounts of contact damage, right? So playing melee was quite difficult. Even with stuff like block, your block's on 2-second cooldown. So even with like max block chance and high defense stuff, you're still just getting damage quite a bit. And of course, the damage of melee itself is very low, I think, in hard mode, in like that mid game, right? So, not pre-hard mode, but hard mode, right? Into like once you get Moonlord items, then you're kind of set, right? And then like pillar items and stuff, like lunar event stuff. Um, then it's no problem because those weapons are really strong, right? Uh, Even stuff like Star Wrath, Meowmere, like you can play with all those; they're all viable. Um, but basically, yeah, up to like Cultist, like maybe Flareon is okay, maybe Flareon's okay. Um, Possessed Hatchet, I tried it, I swapped and killed Dugfishon with it. It was pretty bad. It took like twice as long to kill Dugfishon, and I actually died once, I believe, which I didn't on any of the other bosses. Um, uh, yeah, with range, right? I didn't fail it. I just died once, right? And you get 6 deaths, right? If you're solo, so it's fine. But yeah, it's significantly worse, right, than something like range. Um, so yeah, I would, it's just rough, right? I'll explain why, but later. Um, so yeah, I think up through these, it's decent, right? Skeletron could be a little bit of a problem right now with some of the changes. So you're gonna take a lot more damage, and obviously he moves around quite a lot, and he has the hands and stuff that you need to hit, right? And he's like pretty much in the air the whole time, so it can be a little bit tricky. Now the thing about melee, even in the early game, a lot of your damage is predicated on Berserk, right? So what Berserk does is it gives you 150% more melee damage while taking 5 or more damage each time hit. This used to be, I believe, a strict percentage damage taken increase. Um, Now it's flat damage, I guess, but either way, you still take noticeably more damage. Um, like I'll go from taking pretty much like negligible damage to actually taking damage and potentially dying when I click this button, but you do a ton more damage. And this is pretty much where all your damage comes from. Thank goodness this is not a skill like these where you actually need to roll that on your weapon to actually have access to it, because otherwise melee would pretty much be unplayable, I think. But this actually lets your damage go kind of nuts. So I mean, you can just see, right? So if I'm attacking this, right, stacked up everything, okay, I'm getting 20, 24, 25, 26, right? This is taking into account, obviously, chaotic reverb and this kind of thing, I believe. I don't know. The dummy is a little bit weird. I'm just using DPS meter. I'm not using any like damage calc mods or anything like that. But yeah, you can see it's like pretty low actually, like what you'd expect. But if I press this button, right, and then I start hitting, it'll climb up to 50, even 60, you know. So it's, yeah, 60. You can push this up obviously even higher with more than one target. This is obviously one dummy. So it's almost double. It's like over double damage, right? 150% increase damage. It's very significant. And the thing is about yo-yos, and this is the thing that, like, I mean, I'll mention it, right? Because it's the only thing that really makes yo-yos extremely strong, or decently strong on actual like hard content or like bossing content and that kind of thing, and do actual damage. Is yo-yo snapshot this damage actually. So if you can see, like, let me see. So I'll click this button, right? Throw it out, right, and just keep going. And like even when my buff runs out, you'll notice that my damage actually doesn't drop, right? My DPS actually doesn't drop. That's because I haven't retracted my yo-yo at all. This projectile was created, right? And if I, when like this, no, it's another weird thing too, where like once you stop doing damage, it kind of somehow resets. I don't exactly know. Either way, you can kind of snapshot with this. It's a little bit less obvious on the dummy, but when you're fighting something like the swamp eel, right, in the swamp map. So if you go in this map and you go up to the top, there's an enemy that's kind of like a dungeon guardian, where technically you're not supposed to be able to kill it, I think. It doesn't do insane amount of damage, or at least for me, I could basically face tank it with thanks to this healing right here, right? And then you can kill it as long as you have decent armor shred, which I have, right? Yeah. Um, 9% chance to like armor shred and that kind of thing, and like other debuffs and things like that. Like yeah, penetration, that kind of thing like that. You can kill it, right? And on that thing, I can easily get over 100,000 DPS with this kind of snapshot situation. So yeah, like I said, like you'll notice it also works for conversely, where you kind of have to throw out your yo-yo again after you use it to actually get the damage off. But as you can see, the buff is gone. My damage just hasn't dropped, right? I'm still doing whatever X amount of damage, right? And as long as you don't stop damaging the target, and as long as you don't retract your yo-yo, this damage will remain. So you can actually, deal a decent amount of damage. But obviously without this, it's not very strong. You're doing like 20k, which is playable, but it's not ideal, right? And for mapping content, to be clear, it's fine, right? You saw me kill everything, quite easily. Now, I want to talk about this because there's some weird interaction here where you're actually doing less damage. Like, if you look, like, I'm standing in it, like, it's not giving me any damage buff, right? Like, it says it's supposed to, and I'm doing fire damage, by the way. Like, I'm 100% converting to fire damage when I'm at max range, right? So, or max rage. Yeah, and all that was without the crit, by the way. So if I turn that crit back on, actually, and then I press F again, maybe you'll see the damage increase, kind of, maybe. I don't know. Either way, yeah, this basically just kind of supplements your crit chance a little bit, right? Because you basically gain crit chance every time you don't crit, right? So it helps you kind of keep those crit stacks up. Anyway, so in the early game, right, you have access to this skill straight out the gate. So when you're fighting a boss, you can just click it, and you'll probably get killed when you do it, right? Unless you're able to kind of like stay just outside of range or something. Or maybe when IFQ is like phase transitioning or something, you'll have rage, you'll have some damage here, and then you'll of course have this big damage buff, which makes a huge difference. Right? And that's basically where most of your damage comes from. So most of your damage comes from rage, right? Because it gives you, if you're taking this, it gives you increased attack speed, chance for hits to apply twice, and it gives you crit chance, a little bit of crit chance, right? And of course, it also gives you inherently 1% more damage. I think it's more damage. I don't know. It might be increased per stack of rage, but it's specifically ranged and melee damage, not magic summoner. Although magic and summoner does still benefit off of damage reduction, crit chance, attack speed, health, all these things, right? It just doesn't get that inherent bonus. So even if you look at the leaderboard, even ranged or even melee, even magic and summoner are taking this rage cluster just because of these these mastery options and some of these stat buffs, right? It can be quite strong, right? Because your rage can get up to 30. That means you get, all that much more attack speed, which is really strong, right? Attack speed, again, is global. It works for, magic stuff. It works for, range stuff. It's not, there's no, like, cast speed, right? It's just attack speed across the board. So yeah, so early game, that's kind of your main crutch a little bit is rage, right? You don't really have many other options early game for damage. Obviously, there are missing weapon clusters and that kind of thing, which might help in the future, right? So if you don't, want to play yo-yos, right? Also, these were bugged a little bit before. I think Puppeteer is still bugged. I'm pretty sure it doesn't actually do the damage it's supposed to. And it doesn't pull mobs in. So yeah, that's something, but this is obviously just the best. I think Spool Breaker, by the way, just going over that real quick since we're on the topic. This thing needs probably a much more generous fall off window because it's extremely hard to actually pop. You need so many hits to pop to like make your yo-yo explode. And if you're actually moving around and not standing still in combat, right, which you're basically doing all the time, and it's really only a single target option, right, because you have to be hitting something over and over again. If you're flying around like against Paralysis or something, right, like the fire Conflux boss, you have to move, right? You're just gonna die if you stand still. Even with like a lot of defense and stuff. This just never explodes because it just keeps falling off. Like, let me if I can show it. right? So as you can see, yo-yo's getting bigger, 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 bigger. Now it pops, right? But you know, if I'm like trying to fly around, like simulating, okay, I'm dodging, dodging, dodging. Look, it's getting a reset so often. Like as soon as you basically like you can see it growing, right? But then as soon as I go off, it basically just stops, right? And then I have to charge it back up again, and it still hasn't popped, right? Still hasn't popped, still hasn't popped. If you have multiple targets, it doesn't like keep growing off of multiple targets. So if I'm on one target, I kill it, I switch, it doesn't keep growing, right? The stacks fall off quite quickly. So yeah, it's basically useless. I think the fall off window should just be more generous so that even when you're like, say you're hitting, okay, you go off for a couple seconds, like it's fine. You can come back and you still have a few stacks. Maybe you lose stacks, but as long as you're able to actually like get it off, like in actual combat and not just against a dummy, right, then it'll be okay. But this is just strictly better because it gives you more damage, and your yo-yo moves much faster, right? Which is what the yo-yo speed is, I believe. Um, this thing could be okay. Again, I don't think it works. It doesn't pull any enemies or anything. And I don't see any damage buff from it. So yeah, I don't think it works properly. But this obviously does work. It lets you go through tiles. It's a little funky because obviously the Terrarian projectiles have to they kind of don't pierce tiles, but the yo-yo can. So it kind of gets like a little cool. I mean, it's fine. Like that's intended, right? It's like whatever. But it lets you kind of pass through. It also gives you just more damage, right? So that's the obvious pick. Yeah, they fixed this bug too, but overall, yeah. This also doesn't work, by the way. I'll talk about some of the masteries now since we're on the topic of masteries. So in the early game, like I mentioned, you're taking this. This wide swings needs a buff. Like it is completely useless. One, this goes back to the crit issue I mentioned earlier. Critical hits with melee strikes increase melee weapons size, right? So a big problem with melee is that so many things are predicated on crit, right? This is crit based. This is the crit damage, which means you need a skill be able to crit in order to see the benefits. This is crit based, right? Critting, this gives crit chance, right? There's stuff like that, right? So, but if you look at melee side of the tree, there is not a single crit chance node like there are on range side of the tree, right? Increased crit chance, and there's not a single flat crit node like there is also here, right? 2.5% flat crit, 2.5% flat crit, right? So I'm having to path, not that that's a bad thing. Like, yeah, of course you're gonna path to these like anyway, even if there was a crit chance node over here. But the point is, there's zero in the beginning, right? You obviously crit is generally more of an endgame archetype, but when two of these nodes at the very start are based on crit, it's like, well, where you're getting your damage early, right? Because this is actually probably gonna hurt your damage. This is gonna do basically nothing because the size increase is so small and it only really does anything to the actual sword, right? It's just a very minor like QOL, and even then it has to proc on crit, right? So it barely ever procs early game anyway. So then you're just reliant on this 5% chance, which is decent, right? It's a big damage buff, and the knockback is very noticeable. It's almost kind of annoying because if you don't kill something, then it gets knocked all the way off your screen basically, and then you just have to chase after it. So I actually don't really like the knockback part of it, but it can be useful, right? For a defense layer ish, you're knocking stuff away. Obviously, it doesn't work on bosses, but that's okay. But again, that's the only option that's not crit. And really, this is almost like a pseudo crit, right? Because it's 5% chance for you to basically just do more damage. So it's kind of like crit anyway. So that's part of the issue is that a lot of these things and a big scaling vector is crit, right? Crit chance, crit damage, crit multi, whatever. And you get no access to crit early game or like even remotely, like even hard mode and stuff. Pathing all the way out here is doable. But again, like if you're in the range area, it's just so much easier. You get so many crit chance and flat crit and that kind of thing. Here, it's like you're basically just reliant on whatever crit items you get in terms of like if you roll crit on your weapon. Obviously, there's no more. And the thing is, keep in mind there is no more base crit on shields, right? So again, maybe I should check melee weapons and see if they can actually roll crit, but Let's see, do I have like this Meow Meow or something, right? Um, like, can I even roll crit? That's crit chance. Can you roll base crit though? Let's get like down here. Crit damage, back speed, molten shell. I'll get to this in a minute. Let me hold on to that. So yeah, either way, um, I didn't come across much like many base crit rolls on weapons. I don't know if it's possible. I would hope that it is. It definitely should be if it's not, right? Um, but again, the only way we could get crit is from the shield, right? Base crit, and now that's not possible. Um, and I think that was a little bit of a knee jerk kind of nerf because I think the real issue is that some other archetypes that arguably shouldn't have a shield were able to use the shield, and it was just better than like a quiver, for example. Um, you know what I mean? So I think it's more of just a matter of making those like weapons not be able to use a shield, right? Um, because melee just doesn't have access to crit, right? Very much at all on that side of the tree. Of course, like once you get end game, you get plenty of points. You can path wherever you want. Basically, you can grab crit. That's not a problem. Obviously, some of these changes will be addressed when the tree is expanded, added to, adjusted. But it's just something you keep in mind, right? Is that the way that the melee side of the tree is designed is that there's a fair amount of crit involved, in terms of the power, and there's just not much access to it, right? It's quite difficult even for me. I'm not like I probably could be more indexed into it a little bit if I really wanted to, but I feel like I have a decent amount of crit investment, and I'm even going so far as to take this as well, which is really strong, right? Basically, it basically guarantees that you crit at some point, right? Anyway, but without stuff like that, you're critting far more infrequently, right? Again, this shifts back to the early game problem of, well, this mastery, two of these nodes require you to crit. This requires you to crit. So where are you getting a lot of like actual like noticeable power in the early game is just rage, right? If rage gets touched and nerfed because all classes are abusing it right now, or at least using it, I don't necessarily think it's OP. I think it's quite strong, but then of course melee is going to take a huge hit, right? Um, if stuff like this snapshotting is changed, melee could take a big hit too. Um, at least yo-yos anyway. And then yeah, and then in terms of actual defense in the early game, well, you have a decent amount, right? Early game defenses, I think, are in a decent spot, right? You put on a shield, you get some block chance. You path up to these nodes, you get decent amount of defense, damage reduction, knockback immunity. I did want to say this Undying Grasp does nothing. I can show here. Um, this is a little bit. I forgot I had the bleed heal mode, right? So, as you can see, I have this node ticked. I should be healing for damage done after 2 seconds, right? But as you can see, I'll proc this, right? So my rage is stacking. That means I'm getting percent max life, right? But even after 2 seconds, I'm not healing anything. Like, and then my rage drops, so that's why it looks like I'm healing, but I'm not. It's even more noticeable if actually it's not noticeable. You can't really tell if I take that node off, but because it doesn't, because I'm not normally, as you can see with if I click this bloodbender node, right? Okay, now I'm healing, right? And I'm full HP because I'm actually critting a bleeding enemy, right? So I'm actually getting heals. This does not heal at all. It doesn't do anything. I've tested it both on a dummy, both in combat, actual combat. It doesn't actually heal for anything. So yeah, that's just a bug fix, right? This 200% of reflected damage back on successful block, right? So this slash is a very small AoE. I think it should probably get buffed in terms of AoE. And then wait, I had some other. I have notes and stuff that I'm checking out too. On the side, let me see. Where did I make a note of this? Oh yeah, here it is. Yeah, so yeah, AoE buff. I think it's the AoEs are very small. So if I'm like here, it'll hit. If I'm here, it doesn't hit. Right? The AoE is like here. It's hard to see, but also it only works on block, right? And your block has a cooldown. So and 200% of damage, this damage needs to be pre-mitigated. So I'm pretty sure if I take this, right? If I go back into the map and I go like find this guy, right? So maybe okay, my set bonus is killing them. But there it is. See, you see the AoE, you see the attack, but the damage is like non-existent. It does like 0. These guys are not taking damage. They're literally taking like 1 damage, right? So and they're actually dying to my solar set bonus more than anything, right? These guys don't do that much damage anyway, but you get the idea, right? So see, there's the slash. So the slash is quite small. I think it honestly should be much bigger if you want to actually build around it, right? It's also a little strange because I feel like the damage it's doing, that 200% of damage, is post mitigation. So it looks like that it's basically calculating the damage after monster defense and all these other things, right? But I can't say that for certain. It just feels that way because it does basically no damage. Like and not monster, sorry, not monster defense, your defense, right? So because this does damage based on 200% of damage that you take, right? On a blocked hit. So my guess is that it's actually taking into account your defense and your resistances and things like that, right? Where did my defense drop? I don't know. Oh yeah, because I took this off there. What was I gonna say? Yeah, so I think it's. Oh yeah. By the way, my resistances are capped. I just want to point that out. 75, 75, 75. This is max res. Um, so yeah, just so people know. So I think it's taking your damage after resistances and defense, right? So it's basically not doing anything. Anyway, so defense options early are solid. Now there's one max life node. There's no other than strength, right? Strength obviously is life. But there's no percent life. There's no other flat life on the tree. There's a very little in the way of life scaling other than strength, which is decent. Strength is decent. I mean, I'm sitting at 711 HP, right? But obviously that kind of scales with mod damage anyway. Like you kind of need this much not to get one shot, even on like other characters that aren't like melee, right? And you can scale it, right? Like when I attack, I go up to 1,000, right? 137. Nice number. Um, and then yeah. So that's my thought on that mastery. The rage mastery is quite strong. I think this one doesn't really need much. Now I haven't tried this siphon one. My guess is it's probably quite weak considering that this is 10% and it's very noticeable. 1% is probably not noticeable. This probably should be 5%. This should probably be like 2%. So that you're getting a total of 8 or something if you have both. But anyway, this is I've never tried this one, but this is insanely strong, obviously for damage. You just get a lot more attack speed. Obviously, this doesn't work with yo-yos. That's one of the main reasons I'm not taking it is because it doesn't work with yo-yos. Attack speed doesn't scale really with yo-yos. Just actually scales yo-yo distance, I believe, not actual like hit rate or anything. 20% chance to apply twice is quite nice, but that's basically the only thing you get out of just running yo-yos. But obviously, on any other weapon like a sword or even ranged and stuff like that, is quite strong. This one is very strong too. It gives you max health, but obviously this max health doesn't mean anything if you don't have a way to heal it. I mean, you saw earlier, right? I take off the snow, stack my rage. By the way, look, this is my like yo-yo distance is basically my whole swing. Right? Quite nice. Anyway, yeah, so I'm getting max stacks, and look, I'm still sitting at my HP. I just have this, right? So I think it's fine because right now there's ways to heal it, right? So if I do actually attack, as long as I have this ticked, I'll actually heal up and that'll actually be usable HP, right? That'll actually be real. Otherwise, it doesn't do anything. Same with these Aegis charters, right? They just give you max health. They don't actually heal you, or like, you know what I mean? Like they don't, unless you have some regen or something that actually procs and lets you heal that up. Which right now the regen you have access to isn't very good. Like you get 2, right, and then you get a little bit of percent. So even if you take this whole wheel, obviously you can get heal on kill. That doesn't matter in bosses though, right? Because you're not killing them. So the only healing here is on kill, right? On kill, on kill. Um, Even if you take all this regen, it'll help, but it won't be much, right? Because at the end of the day, it's just 4 flat regen plus 30% increased regen, which is okay. I mean, if you have other sources, maybe it's something, but so that is a little strange. I don't know how to solve that. You know what I mean? Like, I guess you can also just PoT, right? Like, theoretically, you could just PoT, which is it just feels like I don't know. That I don't really think that's anyway. I mainly take this for the 100% fire damage conversion, so that I'm getting max value out of this cluster here, right? Because yeah, it's quite strong. I also added fire damage from the ring, right? So I start once I get max rage, right? I'm basically dealing all fire damage. So I don't know how that works. It feels like this actually, like based on the tooltip, it looks like it adds damage. But then when I'm at max damage and all becomes fire, max rage and all becomes fire, then it doesn't. It's just equal. So I don't know. Anyway, it scales well off this, right? That's one way to scale your damage is with these fire damage multis, and fire damage cluster has 2 multi nodes instead of lightning and cold, which only have 1. It also has this mastery, which gives you plus 40% fire damage multiplier, 20% damage taken multiplier, which is manageable if you're melee. If you're not melee, that might be quite painful. This is also decent, right? Scorch. I would take this in like a boss scenario where you're fighting like Paralysis or something where you don't want to be taking 20% more damage, right? You just take this instead, which allows you to get fire res, right, on the target, which is quite decent. This explode doesn't really matter because you kill stuff instantly anyway, so the explode damage does basically nothing, and it's such a small AOE that it doesn't really chain or anything. Right? Maybe this matters more if you're pure melee and not like a Terrarian with like projectiles and stuff that just kill everything anyway. So don't take my like opinion on that too seriously. Anyway, so that's one thing, is that damage early game is especially mid game. So when we're talking about mid game, right, we're talking about maybe 50 points on the tree, right? So you're looking at, let's see, so you're looking at like not a whole lot of like investment. You're not going to be able to grab all this stuff over here. You might be able to grab this stuff and that kind of thing. I'm not exactly sure, but you won't be able to grab this probably. This is kind of situational anyways. This damage happens after your actual damage, as you can see. I mean, you'll see, right? So I stopped doing damage. Now it does damage, right? So the echo takes a while to go off. So this only, again, is basically a single target damage thing. It used to be 20%, now it's 15. It's still good. But again, it really only matters on single target. And bosses where you're not gonna have 100% uptime on your actual damage. So having it echo after the fact is actually quite strong. And then at a certain point, it's proccing, and now I can attack too, and it'll yeah, I don't know. And there might be some iframes and stuff involved there that might actually make this not worth taking, depending on the scenario. But again, it's almost like a dot. If you think about it as a dot, right? It's okay. It's okay. And it also procs stuff like your purple overload, right? So it'll keep your crit looping and stuff. It'll proc your DOTs like poison and bleed and stuff, right? Because these are just on hit, right? Well, this is melee, so it actually probably doesn't apply bleed, but it does apply poison and ignite and other things like that, right? Yeah, so it's decent for bosses to fly around or move around a lot, or once you have to dodge and stuff, so you're not attacking all the time, right? What do I have this? Okay, whatever. Let's see what else. So yeah, so early game damage is quite rough because and once you like the rage scaling is basically all you get if you're not going yo-yos. So you have to kind of come over here. Maybe your melee weapon has a projectile. Okay, maybe you get 5% more there. You can go into bleed, but bleed is a very heavy point investment. This is just 10%, 10%, right? So you kind of need both to actually get, a reasonable chance to bleed, even if you have some bleed stuff on here, which I don't actually have, but I have some like blood clot. That's not really. I'm sure there's bleed in here somewhere, but like, yeah, more damage for use for bleed. Um, Max bleed stacks. Like, you could invest quite heavily, but it is a big investment, right? You need stuff on gear and that kind of thing. Maybe it helps. I don't I don't know. I don't think it's the most uh or like the best use of points in the mid game, right? Because you need basically the entire cluster to actually be able to take these, right? Because this requires 2 points, so you have to come here and here to collect it, right? And then you might as well click this, so you're actually getting more value because 10% is quite low, especially when your attack speed is so slow. Um, yeah, and then you only get like this is just for clear, doesn't matter. In the early game, this is, I mean, it's fine, more damage, I guess. This is good, but again, you need crit, so it's kind of unusable early game. Anyway, and then the other thing I want to talk about, let's see. So I have like an archive of kind of like stuff that I picked up just so I have like those. Do I have a sword? Yeah. So here's like a blank sword, right? You can see how slow this attack speed is. Like it's incredibly slow when I compare it to something like this ice blade, any vanilla weapon basically, like even just a copper, a vanilla copper sword, right? I don't, right? So if I craft okay, well, maybe it's disabled, but if I just craft like a, let's see, like flat, like this platinum broadsword, right? Attack speed 4.2. This thing is 1.4. Like attack speed on melee weapons for PoT gear is laughable. Like it's so bad. Like if I'm hitting something, like something is like a zombie is probably gonna hit me before I hit it, right? I'm walking up to it. You know what I mean? Um, so this and the DPS is just terrible because of how bad the attack speed is. It's basically unusable. Like you're literally better off just crafting a vanilla sword because it just has like freaking 4x the attack speed, right? Like it's not even close. So I think that's part of the issue too with actual swords, right? For PoT is the attack speed is way too slow. Um, so that hurts quite a bit for early game progression. Melee is, yeah, I hesitate to say it's unviable. I think you can probably kill Wall of Flesh with something like a Blade of Grass or whatever, right? Because it can actually, hit. You have a little bit of range and that kind of thing. But it's just compared to something like the simulacra, which is what I used to kill Wall of Flesh, right? It's, with like Jester arrows, it's just a joke. This thing melted, right? Like if you can see, like I was running like basically pure defense, um, on my gear, and like I started because my Wall of Flesh was bugged. I had to spawn it with the voodoo doll from another world. Anyway, different story. But I killed it. Literally, it dies here, right? This spawn from it. This is like the elevator distance that I killed it at, right? Like you destroy it. You destroy it with range. It's just a joke, right? It's like not even hard. Um, and this goes for a lot of bosses, honestly. And it's a lot to do with damage, but it's also a lot to do with the safety of it, right? You're not gonna get hit as much if you're ranged. And the damage you take as melee early game, especially any part of the game, really, aside from the end game where you have a lot more tools to mitigate it. Um, and you're just gonna die. And against stuff like Wall of Flesh, where I'm pretty sure the domain only has one life, right, or something. So no matter what, right? Um, yeah, it's a little tough. It's a little tough in the mid game. The other thing, so my point is, right? You kind of I feel like melee needs some more defensive options, right? If you look at mage, for example, they have three clusters that all let them get res, right? Fire resistance, lightning resistance, cold resistance, right? That's the only part of the tree that has any res at all. Melee, which is arguably the class that takes the most damage in general because you have to get closer most of the time. Obviously, we're not counting in game. Has no res. It has no like percent max life. It has no all res or anything. It doesn't have a whole lot of options other than this one cluster, right? And like a little bit of DR here, 5%. And that's when you have rage up, right? So you actually have to hit something first. So it's like whatever, right? You don't have much recovery at all unless you're critting. And this is gonna get nerfed, by the way. They've already said this is getting nerfed. So I don't know how big the nerf is gonna be, but it's and to be fair, right now it can be quite ridiculous, especially with other classes, because any class can take this, right? Any class. This isn't strictly for some reason this works on summoner, and I don't know. It's ridiculous, right? It's ridiculous. It does heal an insane amount if you're under the right conditions. But again, as you saw in a mapping scenario, it's pretty much useless. You don't actually crit bleeding enemies because they're already dead, right? But against targets that actually have more HP, and you can actually get the healing up, then of course it's quite strong, right? I mean, you can just see from the dummy, right? Like I'm permanently, you heal up insanely quickly, right? If it's like a single target scenario, but again, you have to bleed the enemy, which is 20%, and then you have to crit the enemy too. So I don't really think it's. I don't know. I think just some of the use cases right now are quite strong. So, but the problem is right now it's really the only viable healing option, really. Um, Obviously you have heal on kill, which if you want a mapping, heal, that's fine, but it's not going to do anything on single target. Right? So I think it's fine that this doesn't do anything while mapping, right? But because you can take stuff like this, but again, that's not going to do anything on single target. So then where's your single target healing? Anyway, whatever. And this doesn't actually heal, right? Maybe that'll help if it gets fixed, but then you're dropping 15 defense and damage immunity, knockback immunity. I mean, of course, if you're running a party, maybe you don't want to be taking 80% of damage from other players, but yeah, it works well in single player, right? Block is also bugged, by the way. You get max block chance just by having a shield equipped. 40%. Even though this only gives 10. I don't know, whatever. I don't know if that's intentional or not, but I mean, anyway. Block is quite good, but it does have a 2-second cooldown, right? So there's no way to reduce that cooldown. Granted, that would be quite strong, but if it was like very situational, like say you had like I know they're planning to add keystones and stuff. If you had a keystone that gave you, 1 second block cooldown, like half block cooldown, but you took some of the damage, like a percentage of the blocked hit damage, like 20% of the damage or something, then you could balance it that way. Yeah, so I think more defensive options would be great. Obviously, this will come with a bigger tree. The other thing is, this is huge. This is huge. This might be one of the biggest things that can help melee. Is these skills, Blood Siphon and Molten Shell, should 100% roll on shields. Like, I don't understand why they don't. They only roll on weapons, right? So this Meowmere rolled it, right? +1 Molten Shell. This means I can equip Molten Shell, right? But unless I roll this on my weapon, I have no access to this skill, which is incredibly good for melee. And it only works on melee anyway, because you need a melee weapon. And I get that maybe they don't want... Again, I think this goes back to just having shields only work with, melee, like not work with ranged weapons, like a bow and a gun and stuff. Like you shouldn't be able to use a shield in those scenarios. I think maybe they'll create like a spell shield a variant that mages can use, or maybe they want to let mages use shields. I think that's fine. Like I think that should be fine. You should be able to use molten shell if you want. The problem is right now the only way to get access to this, which is arguably quite a strong early game tool for defense, is by rolling it on your weapon. And guess what? You get like no currency early game. You can't roll this. Like you can't guarantee that you roll this, which means you just don't have access to this. So if they're presuming that people have access to this and balancing around it, well, it's not going to work, right? It's very strong because it gives you 75% damage reduction, right? For a little bit of time. I don't actually have this key bound, but so if I change this, right, I can show it. But basically, you only have to roll this. I really think this should be rollable on shields too. It makes sense because it's freaking shield and it gives you molten shell, right? Same with blood siphon. This blood siphon, I don't know how you get this. Maybe it's rollable on weapons too. I've never seen it. But this should also be rollable on shields, or like melee armor or something, right? Like I don't know. You should be able to get access to these because the only other item restricted one is this, right? This only rolls on ranged weapons, right? And I don't even know what this does, to be honest. But these are quite important for defense, right? So this will give you healing and regen and stuff. I don't actually know what it does. And this, this one gives you damage reduction. So you can see the little shields rotating, right? For 7 seconds, right? It gives you damage reduction, right? Obviously, this can be consumed, right, until broken, right? So it's like a barrier. You can see it on your HP, right? So there's these shields, right? So you can take some damage. Can I get to the slime in time? Take some damage. Okay, I don't know if I got there in time, but anyway, you get the idea, right? So this is a huge defensive tool that melee pretty much doesn't have access to in the early game because there's not enough currency to guarantee that you roll it on a weapon. Also, do you really want to sacrifice a mod on your weapon for this? No, because then you're losing damage. Maybe, right? Maybe, but you're losing damage, right? It's kind of awkward. So my proposition is that it just rolls on shields too, right? I think you should just roll on shields, and it should just require you to have either a shield or a melee weapon. Or, yeah, you know what I mean? Something like that. Because this would be a big help in terms of early game defense, right? And it would actually be usable. But I didn't have this on anything, on a weapon, right? So in the early game, like, and I didn't have the currency to roll for it either, right? Like now I do. Well, arguably now you wouldn't because they nerfed currency, like to the ground. Like it's basically unobtainable. Like some of the stuff now. I farmed a lot before they did that, so that's why I have a lot of currency. And then there were some bugs, and that's why it's just 15,000. Like basically this got converted to the anyway, whatever. And they'll buff it again, I'm assuming. But let me see. So that's an issue, right? Defense, which can be helped, by making this just more accessible. Same with this blood siphon one, more accessible again. How they want to do that, I don't know, right? Maybe they just make this only accessible to melee classes. Like there's a class system now, so just restrict it. Like if you're not a melee class, you can't use these. I think that's a little silly. I don't think they should do that, to be fair. But if they really wanted to, for balancing purposes, you know, then whatever, right? But I really think it should just be rollable on shields or something, or like rings even, or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, or amulets, or gear, right? I don't know. I think base types, like gear in general, needs an overhaul in terms of the PoT gear, right? They could go as far as to create, different base type categories like energy shield, evasion, like PoE, right? With armor, and it could only roll on armor based gear, whatever. I just think we need more access to this, right? In the early game, especially. Even in the late game, it's just nice to have this as a tool, right? And basically, you can't right now unless you roll it on your weapon, which then you're sacrificing, potentially a big damage mod or something. Anyway, so that's it. So I was thinking, yeah, okay, uh, just ways, obviously the tree will expand and probably add more stuff, but yeah, more defense options on the tree. um, and various things like that, right? Maybe some masteries that give like double defense from your shield, right? But um, right, somehow limit that to melee, right? Something like that, right? Where you get there's ways of building defense, but it's not just like click this to get more defense. It's like, okay, you have to have a shield equipped, and then the defense on your shield is doubled from or whatever, right? Um, things like that, right? Just ways of getting a little bit more. Maybe max res, right? Right now you're capped at 75% for your res. Maybe there's a mastery on the tree. Maybe there's a cluster that's like plus 5 fire, plus 5 lightning, plus 5 whatever cold res, and then the mastery is plus 1 to max res, right, or something like that. So then you can get 76% across the board, right? And maybe you can roll max res on like rings or something, right? um Whatever. um yeah, so stuff like that could help. Again, the crit thing, yeah, I mentioned before. And the skills thing, right? I think those are huge because right, or as it is right now, I think like, yeah, melee is just quite underpowered in general. Even in the end game, like the scaling options are quite strange. I'll talk about that in a second. Um, yeah, so yeah, more attack speed on base weapons, PoT weapons, like they're basically unusable right now. Even in the early game, if I pick up one of these, I'm not using this. Like I'm just not. It does no damage. You know what I mean? It just feels bad to use because of how slow it is, and it doesn't have damage to back that up. It has damage because of my gear, but normally it doesn't do damage. It doesn't do damage anyway. um this kind of goes for stabs too. I think stabs feel terrible to use. Stuff like this, like, what do you mean I have to charge it up anyway? um what else? So yeah, so now we get more into like the late game, right? So scaling in the late game for melee, right? There's plenty of options right now, right? Also, oh yeah, the one other thing I wanted to point out. This goes back to early game, and just class balance in general. If you look at nodes, melee has two generic melee damage nodes. These two right here, 5% melee damage, 5% melee damage. Okay, let's check range. Oh, two. Okay. Oh, there's one. That's 10%. Wait, 5%, 5%. Hang on. What? What about magic? About 5, 5. Oh, these work for summon damage too. Wait, there's more here. Hang on. What about summoner? Oh, 5%, 5%, 5% minion damage, 5% minion damage, sentry. You know, sentry damage. Oh, but wait, but melee doesn't. Melee has two. It has two generic damage nodes. So you're already looking at much lower early game scaling. If you're ranged, you can just come up here, click these two, come up here, come up here, come here, bam. You're already sitting at 20% increased damage. Melee, it's just two. Now, you could say, okay, fine, path over to ranged, yeah, okay. But range can do that too. Range can just path over. Range gets bonus damage from rage as well. Um, and this is also not generic, right? This is what is it called? There's a prerequisite. You have to have rage stacks to actually benefit, and it's 1%, right? So, you actually have to hit something enough times to where you stack your rage up, and then you're getting, increased rage or increased melee damage, right? And it's actually increased, not more damage, I guess. Um, that's the other thing too. For range right now, some of these, like I believe this one, maybe that one too. There's some damage that actually you get projectile scaling, you get all this kind of stuff, right? Um, there's ailment stuff. Melee just has bleed. All like the shock, ignite, chill is all over here. There's some ignite here for projectiles, right? Whatever. You could potentially roll down on your weapon or gear, right? You can get a chance to ignite. I think I have some somewhere. Maybe not, but I used to, right? I think some of my older rings, like this one, chance to apply on fire, whatever. Um, yeah. So my point is, there's a lack of generic damage on the melee side of the tree right now as well, right? And these focus charges are, yeah, on kill, so they're limited. They're not that great right now. I think devs are aware of that, right? They're pretty low impact, not the most important. They basically do nothing. There's no way to get these charges other than on kill right now. Obviously, that can change. Maybe you have ways of maintaining them, or you get min charges or something, right? Get some Relicash boots or something, right? You know what I mean? Um, that can be fixed, whatever. And if that's fixed, well, then you have another damage scaling vector, another defensive layer, which will be great. I think that'll help too. But again, like, it's just a weird dichotomy of all these other classes get access to a lot of generic damage, right? So these are just multipliers to your damage, right? If you're running elemental, which you will be on mage, right? And then the other thing is, well, okay, sure, but surely melee gets nice scaling options in the late game too, other than just the limited 30 stacks of rage. There's no other ways to get max rage at this point, right? So you can't really scale it too much. Well, I mean, yeah, you've got these crit options we talked about. Okay, so now you're at 80, 90 points. You can afford to path all the way here, grab these flat crit. You can grab this one. You can start scaling a little bit of crit, right? You can grab crit chance here. If you wanted to, you could grab this, but it's not really worth it because it's only 5%. Okay, maybe you grab this node, you get 40% crit damage, but then you obviously sacrifice crit chance, which you already don't have a lot of. This is basically useless. I think this should get changed to either have more max stacks, more percent size scaling with stacks, or just not have a crit requirement. You know what I mean? So yeah, so it either not have a crit requirement, have more max stacks, or have increased percentage per stack, right? Because right now it's just very useless. Even late game, you would never click this button. Like, even if you were pure, like, if you were running like I don't know, there are pretty much no pure melee weapons, right? There's no reason to ever take this node. It doesn't give any meaningful AoE. Like, even, okay, say I click it, right? Okay. Let's look at it. Oh, I'm at max stacks already? Like, this is how big my sword is when I get max stacks. But yeah, it gives me like 2 centimeters extra versus this, right? This is oh yeah, this is 1 stack. If my stacks fall off or anything. Yeah, it's okay. So this is no stacks, right? So now I'm here, no stacks. Like, yeah, you can see it get a little bit bigger, but like, okay. Yeah, I don't know. It's pretty rough. Is my point. And obviously it doesn't work well with stuff like yo-yos or flails or anything, right? Yeah, so that's an issue. Also, don't forget a lot of the I don't know if I have, okay, so yeah, so Solar Eruption and Daybreak, these don't scale well with crit. Why? Because their explosions don't crit. They can't crit. So there's a lot of just weapons that are like, okay, I don't scale with crit, I can't do very well, whatever. So yeah, there's things like that, right? You don't get a lot of crit chance. Even with the investment that I have, I'm still sitting at quite low crit chance without this stack, right? Critical Overload. This is basically solving my crit quite nicely, which is fine. I mean, sure, you don't want crit to be super accessible, but again, there's just too many things on the melee side of the tree that require crit when you can't really scale it very easily in the early to mid game at all. And maybe you want to make it an end game only thing. Well, then why is the first mastery available like 2 crit options, right? Anyway, and your healing is locked by crit, whatever. Maybe this gets fixed and whatever, right? There's some other options there, but the idea still stands. Anyway, okay, so there's very few generic damage nodes on the tree. Rage is carrying melee early, right? As we discussed. Yeah, if you're running yo-yos, you can get these 2, right? So that is nice damage. And this is also just nice damage, right? So, but again, yo-yos are quite weak early before you get the yo-yo bag, and you can, or yo-yo glove, right? That's hard mode anyway. And then counterweights and stuff. Like then, okay, now you're hitting more. You have like, but originally, like, we were talking about pre-hard mode yo-yos. They're quite weak. There's some bosses that they're good against, like I Cthulhu. It's quite good. King Slime, it can be solid. Once you get to stuff like Skeletron, Ball of Flesh, anything beyond that point, it can get quite rough. There aren't a ton of options. It's okay. It's playable, but yeah, the damage is just nothing compared to, and the yo-yo specifically because of the way that they hit, right, and the lack of AOE that they have, without stuff like Terrarian, which actually has like all these proj and stuff, right, which is basically giving you, yeah, AOE, right. Your hits are very minimal, so dealing with like lots of enemies at once is quite rough, right. And that's also not taking into account the fact that you have like very low yo-yo duration. Obviously, there's some nodes that help with that, right? This yo-yo duration node is quite good. It's noticeable. Um, but again, yeah, it's just quite weak overall. Because of the ways that yo-yos work, it's just not the strongest. Um, early to mid game, it's just not, even with high damage, it's not the best, right? Um, and obviously stuff like this doesn't work very well. I don't think this works at all. This would help actually a lot with that AoE problem, but it just doesn't work. Like, I mean, like, yeah, I don't know if I can show it. Maybe I can show it. I mean, this is just a bug though, right? So this is just a bug fix problem. I should probably report it. Is there any more enemies? Oh, here. Yeah. So, okay, it doesn't, it's kind of hard to see, but it doesn't actually, like, pull the mobs. Like there's no, like, it doesn't do anything. Right? Like there's, it's hard to see because they're kind of dying very fast, but as far as I'm aware, like these guys, like they didn't get pulled or anything. They're just like walking normally. It doesn't seem to increase any DPS or anything like that. Like, right. Um, yeah, it's just not, just doesn't seem to work properly. Uh, like I don't know, like I don't know. It's kind of a strange node, but that could help clear if it actually functioned the way that I'm assuming it's supposed to function, which it's supposed to like hit targets and like pull them in and like uh, it's, I don't know, maybe it, I don't know, it's hard to tell because I kind of kill stuff so fast, right? But it doesn't feel like it does anything, right? Like even on these enemies that are surviving multiple hits, they're just kind of still just running at me. Right? They're not getting like pulled or anything. So I don't know. Maybe I'm just reading it wrong, and I don't know. It's not really. It just doesn't. It doesn't feel impactful, right? And again, this also, yeah, it just doesn't scale well in the end game anyway. Because if you're killing anything, everything anyways, it's not gonna like, you're not gonna do this like 75% damage anytime you do damage to anything. Like, I don't know. It's just not. I think it's just not functioning as intended. Whatever. I just realized I'm getting this bad statue buff, so it's kind of bugging my defense up more than it should. Whatever. Besides the point. What else? So there's not a lot of generic scaling options that can be fixed on the tree, right? So that's one thing. And then when you look at endgame scaling, okay, so I'm looking at the melee side of the tree. Okay, there's not, like, it's defense, rage. I've already got those clicked. Where do I go for damage? I mean, here, well, I have to kill stuff to do damage, so that's not going to work on bosses. And I already kill stuff fine, right? Like, it's not too hard to clear. Okay, here, oh, this is projectiles. Well, I'm using, Terraria, I'm using Star Rat. They have projectiles. Okay, I'll put this. Distant enemies, well, yeah, I mean, I have some range with Star Rat or something, right? Okay. There's no standing still. Well, you're basically never standing still. Whatever, I'll click it so I can take this mastery, which gives me, a little bit of AoE or something, right? But I'm kind of killing stuff anyway, so it doesn't really do much. These are range specific. This is range specific. Whatever, that's fine. It's in the range section of the tree. But there's nothing in the melee section of the tree. And the scaling options you have, okay, it's like, okay, crit, obviously, whatever. That's like a kind of a global scaler, right? Poison. Okay, I'm pathing all over here, grabbing poison. This thing gives me 1% more damage for poison, right? Okay, that means I have to stack poison. This is good against single target. Okay, so now I'm stacking poison on hit. You can see, okay, 4% more damage, 5% more damage, 6%. Okay, if I'm fighting a boss, that's meaningful, right? 12%, 14, 15. It's stacking pretty quickly. 20% more damage. Okay, now we're talking. That's a scaling vector. Okay, cool. But I'm having to path all the way over here. That's fine. Whatever. You have a ton of points, you can do that. Now I'm coming in here. Okay, I'm dealing fire damage. I'm converting with my rage thing. Okay, I can take this all the way in the mage section. This is good damage. Multiplier. Um, you know, ignite chance. Huge multiplier. Debuff, whatever. Clear if I want it. You can argue about its effectiveness, but it's there. Okay, yeah, I'm pathing all the way to the mage section. Cool. So that's a pretty solid scaler, right? Fire damage scaling, right? Multiplier and all that. Okay. Oh, this is all damage. Hang on, this is all damage, right? So okay, I'm gonna click this, take this. Now I'm scaling my max mana to do damage, which is fine, but again, it's awkward. It's just thematically is strange for melee, right? So that's why I have a ton of mana, right, and a good amount of int is because I get, per 25 max mana, I'm gaining, a 1% all damage, right? And you also gain 30% max mana with this node, so it's quite good. This is also 30 int, pretty nice. This gives you 10% max mana. Okay, you're like this is another 20 int. Okay, these are great points to take. Well, I can path here, a little bit more int. Hey, here's 10 max mana straight up. This is another 5% max mana. This is 10 int, 10 int, Okay, so taking all these points is worth it. And I'm coming over here to grab flat crit anyway. Okay, great. Attack speed would be good if I wasn't using a yo-yo. Then this used to give, I believe this used to just give straight up damage when you're at max mana, which as melee you're already always at max mana, so it's free. And it still does give a little bit of damage based on current mana, right? Lower mana, more damage up to 40, but you still get some. I believe you still get some. I mean, if I check DPS, let it level out a bit or whatever. Okay, 27, 28, 20, 30. It's a little inconsistent because poison ticks are going whatever. And then I untick this, like, let my stuff fall off. Maybe second, okay. It's doing marginally, it's doing a little bit less damage, right? Like you can see here, it's like, okay, around this time I was a little bit higher, right? Like before I was ticking up, one of my yo-yos is stuck on the ground, so yeah, so yeah, I mean it's a little hard to tell, but I tested this even with this wording, it still looked like it was doing some damage, and it's only 3 points, and really there's not a whole lot of more options to take damage. Okay, you can path all the way up here into the summoner section to grab this, which is basically it's basically a dot, right? 50% damage dot, which scales nicely with your damage. So the more damage you do, the more damage it does. It's okay for quite a bit of points, but hey, you're taking int here anyway, which is scaling your mana, which is then giving you more all damage, right? So it's it doesn't feel bad to path here and grab these int nodes, but you know I think it's fine to have this work for all damage types, but it's just like it just doesn't feel the best as melee, where you're like, okay, but I don't want to have to stack mana, and like I'm not using the mana. It's just a bit awkward. Why can't I just stack more life or something to gain damage? Obviously, that would be good. It would be really strong. You'd have to delicately balance that, of course. If you want to do like strength or life scaling or even damage based on your defense. This gets into quite a bit of a stat stacking conundrum, right? Where you're able to stack one stat and gain both damage and defense, and it's just whether or not you want that in the game is completely up to you. I can understand both ways. It can be kind of cool, but also it's a little bit straightforward, not very interesting. Doesn't allow for much build diversity because it's probably going to be better than most things will be because of the stat values you can get, and if you all in on it, yeah, it can get a little bit out of hand, right? But if you do add any damage taken before mana, then this will end up doing that too, right? You'll be able to stack max mana and get tons of damage and defense. Anyway, just something to think about, right? Is that a lot of this there's just not a lot of unconditional power, right? that's kind of what I was getting at earlier. There's conditional power, right, in terms of bleed and rage and crit, right? And crit can become unconditional at a certain point, right? If you scale it enough. But right now, there's not quite enough options for that on melee. Um, even if you fully index into it. And then it's like, okay, there's no like armor shred on the tree. There's no armor pen. So that's not really, a vector you can scale on the tree at least. I mean, you can get it on your rings and stuff. Fine. Maybe that doesn't belong on the tree. Okay, sure. That's fine. But again, like thematically it's just a little bit strange to have to, stack mana as like a main. It's really one of the biggest damage options you have is to kind of index into this right side of the tree with, you know, there's just not a lot of, as you can see on melee, some of the end game options are just to go to the other sides of the tree and pick up those damage options. There's not a ton on the melee side, which is fine, and that'll get fixed, I'm sure. And I don't think it's bad necessarily. There's just a clear lack of damage scaling other than rage, right? On the melee side of the tree, really. Which will get fixed later on. So yeah, I think that could kind of be a problem in the future, right? I don't know. It'll also get I don't know, it'll get addressed. But that's kind of some thoughts I had anyway. On melee, I think defense again is also a little bit lacking because even with like quite decent investment, right? I can get more. I can have a pure defensive shield. I can get um more life with strength and that kind of thing, right? But like there's not a ton of roles you get right now, at least um on gear outside of like shields and armor do have like increased defense rolls, but obviously PoT armor is kind of a joke compared to vanilla right now. Shields also roll like it's kind of you can't not use a crit shield if you want to do crit because your crit just gets cut in half, right? Like it's much harder to play, right? Because then not only just do I lose, 6.8%, you know, crit chance in general, but all my crit scaling, all my increased crit chance gets cut as well because it all scales off each other, right? So you lose a lot of crit without having base crit on shield, um, and that kind of thing, right? So, and it's just a little bit of a conundrum when you have stuff scaling off crit in the melee side of the tree and that kind of thing. So yeah, there's just it just doesn't get pushed quite as far as stuff like range and magic and summoner where you can you just got much more access to a lot of other options, right? Um, and melee does have attack speed, right? Attack speed can obviously in like dex and attack speed, right? If you're not using yo-yos, is good. Right, that's another damage scaling option. But that's just attack speed, right? It's not it is more DPS at the end of the day, but so yeah. That's kind of it in terms of like end game stuff. Yeah, the defense again, like yeah, even with like quite high investment, it's a little bit lacking. Like you still there's I think it's a more of a balance issue than anything. There's still some mobs and stuff, especially like in the Moonlord domain, for example, is the worst. Even right now, I go into the Moonlord domain, I get one tap, even at full HP, all this by one of those baby Plantera mobs. Like their contact damage is way too high. For example, some of the dragon and wyvern type enemies have insane contact damage as well, so you'll die after like 3 hits or something. Just fine, like maybe. But anyway, the Moonlord domain is just kind of cringe in general because the spawn rate's really high. There's blocks and stuff, and you're just getting bombarded by guys. Right, you could take a homing potion. It's solvable, but yeah, and I mean, of course, you can click stuff like this, to get some armor pen that kind of thing, which it should help. It's not going to show on a dummy, but yeah, it is meaningful, right? And there's potions and things like that. So There's vanilla ways to scale your damage too, of course. Um, but strictly like looking at the tree, there's definitely room for improvement on both defense and offense for melee, and especially in the early game when it's just completely eclipsed by. I mean, this is kind of inherent. I think mage is a little bit gated by mana, right? Um, Summoner is really strong, right? Whips are going to be great. Plus, you get the summon damage and all that kind of stuff. I think Summoner is probably quite a-okay. I think Mage, yeah, it does have mana problems, but at least Mage has a lot of skill options early game. Obviously, these skills kind of fall off in the later game, as discussed by some other people on the Discord and that kind of thing. Um, but at least they have these options out the gate, right? Melee has these gated by items, which are both important for defense, and you just don't have those, so it just feels bad because, um, yeah, you're just taking a ton of damage because you're up close and you're melee, and you don't really have the tools to mitigate that damage early on. You don't have really many skill options. You have this one, which is basically mandatory for damage, and that's about it, right? And your skills also don't have skill trees, right? Like this doesn't have a skill tree. This has a skill tree. This has skill tree. This has no skill tree, but this has a skill tree, right? Um, these don't, I guess. So there's just not as much flexibility in melee. Um, Oops, it's up now. But yeah, and then this also doesn't scale the fire damage like it should. Um, Going back to that, I think it's a bit of a bug. But it's supposed to be standing fire deals damage to you, but increase your cast fire damage substantially. It doesn't. It literally makes you do less damage. I don't know why. But yeah, it does. And again, I'm doing fire damage when I'm at max rage. I'm converting 100% of my damage to fire. Um, and I have all this fire damage stuff anyway. Yeah. So I think a lot of these problems again will get fixed when there's more options on the tree. But again, early game, this is what you're gonna have access to, and it does pale in comparison to the damage output of basically all the other trees, right? Unless you're going yo-yo, and then it's like, you know, more in line with it. And even then, like I talked about, yo-yo struggles with some of the other stuff, and these nodes don't quite do the job. This one is good. It's just more damage. Like this is good. If you're yo-yo and you take the rage cluster and you take all the way up to this in the defense, then you're okay. Obviously, the yo-yo weapon type in general has some issues early on, especially basically throughout the whole game. Like when this is your only like, yeah, it's okay. Like when you have infinite duration yo-yos now, it's a little bit more viable basically. But before that, it's quite difficult on stuff like wall of flesh and that kind of thing. Um, which is fine. I mean, melee's always going to have weak points like that. I mean, that's just inherent, right? Range is always going to have the distance factor. Um, Same with magic, right? Summoner too, really. Melee is just the only one kind of stuck in close combat, at least in the early game when you don't have a ton of projectiles. Even with something like an ice blade, all right, projectile frequency is quite low, right? Like you really want your DPS to be reliant on a projectile, and the projectiles for melee weapons usually, if we take a look, right, we take a look at the vanilla weapons and stuff, right? Okay, and talk about some options. Obviously, keep in mind that it's not 1.4.5 yet for Team Mod Loader, so we don't have stuff like Phase Blade and Phase Saber, which could be good. It could help a lot with melee. You have Blade of Grass. Okay, now we're talking. You have a little bit of range and projectiles and stuff you can shoot out. Edge of Night is it's okay, but again, like it's still quite close range, right? I mean, that's natural. Right? That's natural. Beekeeper is like reliant on hitting enemies before you spawn the bees and stuff. Same with what's it called, high five, but the high five is I don't know, it's quite low damage to be honest. I tried Wall of Flesh on high five and it just didn't work. You just did like the hungries were just too much, right? And you just kind of died and you just didn't do damage. Um, yeah, Cascade has the on fire, which could help a little bit anyway. I think for Wall of Flesh, your best bet on melee is something like for a Blade of Grass or whatever. Um, yeah, that might be okay. And then once you get into hard mode, early game, like I said, early game is fine because you can kind of just base tank stuff to an extent and press that berserk button and just do a lot of damage, right? Yeah, so there's that. You used to be able to get much higher crit chance early game. I understand why crit shouldn't necessarily be an early game scaler, but it kind of is for stuff like mage, right? Where you and range where you can get decent amount of crit early game. Yeah. So in hard mode, okay, maybe icicle. It's not the best. The projectiles do only 67% of base damage. Um, yeah, and then you're starting to get frostbrand is good. Like this is probably your best early game sword because you can get it, or like early hard mode sword rather, because you can get it quite easily from ice mimics as long as you can find the ice mimics. You need to go farm them, obviously. Um, yeah. Other than that, like most of these other weapons are quite bad. This is bad. Like breaker blade is like okay, at least it's big, so you have a little bit of range. But yeah, sickle is fine. It's usable. Again, like it's just like I did actually get one of these early on, but I was ranged at that point, and it's like, why would you swap? Key brand with the changes could be good to 1.4.5 changes. Uh, this does have prod, right? But this is a weird one. Like this is this is only for specific seeds and stuff, right? Um, most of this stuff is just quite very close range and that kind of thing. And right now the defense, especially once you get into hard mode, then you're looking at like some defense problems, right? Because you just start taking too much damage. Yeah, Decimal is probably viable. Obviously, like yeah, Trick Excalibur is good. Like Terrorblade is good, obviously, right? Um, True Knight's Edge is not bad either. But again, you have to kill the mech bosses to start using these weapons, right? Um, so I think yeah, mech up to mech bosses can be quite challenging for melee, which again is fine. Like doesn't you shouldn't necessarily have not, but the problem is like the other classes are just kind of smooth sailing all the way through. But yeah, melee just doesn't have a ton of options there. I mean, like I said, there are a couple that give you a little bit of range and stuff. Like Frostbrand is probably what I would use. Um, I haven't played it, so I don't actually know how good it is, but that's probably what I would go for. Beam Sword is not that good because it doesn't pierce any targets really, and it doesn't have the debuff. Like it has one pierce. I think Frostbrand has yeah pierce is like 3 or something, or I don't know. But that's kind of what you sign up for as melee anyway, I guess. But I think it's just important that there are tools to kind of help because like you don't want melee to be that much worse than the other classes. So I think there could be some options there for, and again, fixing some of the bugged masteries and things like that. Like this healing thing could be quite good. If it worked properly. Um, again, like this could be good if it was just every hit, and you could get much bigger size, right? Because then you would have more range in AOE. That would be great. But making it crit only and also only stack up, 5 stacks is quite bad right now. Um, yeah, this is okay, but it's not the most reliable. It's good early game, very early game. And obviously if you get decent attack speed, you know, this could trigger more often and whatnot. So it could actually be okay, and you probably get some pretty high damage numbers with when you actually do proc this. But um, it's again just conditional. There's a lot of conditional damage in melee, um, and even some like conditional defense and various things like that. This also could. I understand why this is quite small. I honestly think this could be. Yeah, this is abusable by every class, right? It's the problem. Um, so you don't want to make stuff like this too powerful, right? Like, I think this damage reduction is fine. This is good. This is a good note because it's only one or more rage stack and it's 5%. So it's reasonable. This doesn't stack up very much, right? At all. Even at max rage, it's quite minimal. But yeah, again, it's hard to make that really strong. Rage hold time. This, I mean, you really don't take this. I mean, you have to take this, right? But so rage falls off still quite quickly. I don't think that's a big issue though, because as long as you're getting stuff with rage. But there's just not as obviously later there might be more rage scaling options and stuff too. But it's conditional, right? It's just a lot of conditional damage on the melee side, as opposed to a lot of this unconditional damage. Like there's so many damage options on ranged, and especially, which can still take advantage of stuff like bleed and rage and all that. So, and summoner also has like tons of like just like it just has crit chance everywhere, minion damage everywhere, like summon damage, like um, you know, all nearby play plus 5 like there's just damage everywhere, right? Max minion, which is huge, whip damage all throughout, a lot of crit, right? Grimoire crit, Grimoire damage, sentry. I get that there's like different like buckets, like this is summoner, this is summons, this is like grimoires, sentries, whips, but you're at least using whips and summons, right? Or like grimoires and summons or something, right? So, and this is all summon damage, right? This is minion damage. I don't know how it interacts with grimoire summons. I'm assuming it doesn't, but maybe it does. You have, speed, of course. Um, you have stuff like this, which I don't know what the other options are. Yeah, I mean, you have conditional damage. Well, but this is like unconditional, right? There's a lot of just unconditional flat damage, right? Same with range. Range has a lot of unconditional flat damage, right? It's got some conditional stuff too, right? Like this one, and um, but it's got stuff like this, which used to be really strong. It's probably pretty bad now, to be honest. It's only 10% of base damage. It's almost like why would you ever? Yeah, I don't know. You probably wouldn't take that. It's probably better to just take this and try to stand still on or something, or like use like glorified bullets with this or something. Anyway, um, yeah, there's just so yeah, that's kind of my issues with melee right now. I would say that in terms of nerfs and things, like I said, I feel like melee doesn't have that much power right now. So there's not a ton of abusable stuff. Most of the abusable stuff has already got fixed or altered, right? Like the shield base crit nerf, I think is quite impactful for melee. More so, I mean, obviously other classes were abusing it. I think that's just a matter of making sure that shields only work with melee or like with one-handed weapons, right? Or whatever the intention is, right? Just making sure that that functions correctly. So I'm pretty sure quivers work with them. Like I have this quiver. I can equip it. 466. I don't actually know. This does. I don't. Can I see my crit damage? Not really. I don't know if this actually does it, but you can actually equip it. I feel like you should be able to equip it. For example, right? So it goes both ways. So that's the kind of thing you should be able to use quivers on melee. Without a bow, right? You should be able to use quivers without a bow. Guns obviously like are one-handed, I guess. Maybe you could have like an ammo pouch or something in the offhand or whatever. I don't know. I don't know. That might be excessive, but maybe just Yeah, it's tough to balance like one versus two-handed weapons and stuff. You could also add some like mastery or keystone or whatever that does something when you have an empty offhand, right? For melee, for example, maybe you have like way more attack speed or damage or something with offhand empty, right? Like if you as if you're dual wielding or not dual wielding, two handing a weapon or something, or like right. Dual wielding would be cool too, but that's probably got all kinds of issues. I don't know how that would work, but yeah. Some thoughts there. Um, let's see. Anything else that I'm missing? I don't know. I don't think so. I kind of went over my gear setup too when I was talking about the passive tree, that kind of thing. There might be some interactions that I'm actually not aware of, like bug stuff that it might work, that I just don't know. But I'm not trying to find that anyway because obviously don't get should get patched and stuff if they exist. Um, yeah, the utility stuff is pretty good overall. I think it's I don't know. The magic find stuff is a little bit of a balancing thing. Pretty much inaccessible by melee until the very late game. Um, which you could argue is quite. I don't know. I'm assuming the utility stuff is going to be you know separated out, segmented out, into a different tree or different something else, right? Later on down the line, whatever. That's fine. Again, like most of the gear is a whole other story. I know that's aware people are aware of. The PoT stuff is just quite weak in terms of both weapons and gear compared to vanilla. Obviously, for slots that don't like rings and stuff are quite good. I think stuff like this is fantastic, right? This unique ring from the boss, it's really strong. Um, yeah, I mean, it's about it. Can't really think of anything else right now. Um, just kind of rambling and stuff, whatever. Like maybe there's some useful info for melee. Um, yeah, again, like a lot of it just comes down to balancing and lack of content or lack of like stuff that's going to be added, right? Like the tree, for example, is going to be expanded quite a bit, um, and that can obviously offer a lot more options. But in terms of what those options are and like what to change that's in the game right now, there's some thoughts there for just kind of how things are laid out and the power scaling and stuff. Because like you know if I was range, I'd probably be doing 2x damage, if not way more. Like I've seen some range characters get millions of DPS and stuff. You might be able to push that with the very specific melee setups and stuff, or like with Zenith or something. Like I don't know, but I tried to be I don't know ethical, I guess. I don't know in in the way that I'm playing it so far, and just like at least trying to kind of what's more intended, right? Kind of staying away from a lot of those exploity bugs and interactions and things like that, right? And just basically trying to take what you would take stuff at face value and be like, okay, this is if everything functioned correctly, this is what I would take. Um, yeah, that's about it. I think off the top of my head, kind of gave some ideas. I know there's keystones coming, and like I mentioned a few ideas, offhand stuff, maybe something that makes you um not use health potions, but then you gain like life steal or something, or like huge regen or something like that. Um, maybe there's a way to convert like mana regen to life regen. I don't know, instead of like the other way around. I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of stuff to do in that regard, right? I think there's a lot of cool stuff to be added. But yeah, I think that's about it. Yeah, can't really think of anything else, so kind of stop it there. I've probably just been nonstop rambling the whole time anyway. Um, yeah, so hopefully this is helpful. And I don't know. Because yeah, I was requested to provide some feedback, so I just wanted to do that. Um, and yeah, that's about it. Peace.